This is First Creek in Knoxville. When James White first came here 200 years ago, he built a settlement along its banks. First Creek powered his mill. Over there where that parking garage is, he built a fort. First Creek was the landmark around which James White centered his world. Today he'd be hard-pressed to find his landmark in some places. Hi, I'm Bill Landry. Welcome to the 4th season of the Heartland Series. In an upcoming episode, we'll trace the origins of First Creek back up there somewheres to where it empties into the Tennessee. What will we see along the way? How has Knoxville and East Tennessee changed in the 200 years since White first settled here?
Last season we began by presenting Tennessee, the unfinished century. We learned our history from those who lived it. This year we will build on what they told us and begin to look to the next 100 years.
This is the Lyric Theater in Knoxville. Used to be called Stobbs. The likes of Anna Pavlova and Sarah Bernhardt have graced this stage. It's one of Knoxville's best-known landmarks. But landmarks change.
What will become of our landmarks in 100 years, or 100,000? What of the Smokies, our greatest landmark? How will they change? We'll explore that question in an upcoming episode. The future will not be our only concern. History is still our best guide for the years ahead. We'll bring you the story of Sam Houston, the Raven, friend of the Indian and romantic hero of Tennessee and Texas. We'll explore our history through archaeology, and we'll still while away the hours with our Heartland family. We'll visit with old friends.
Say hope, back, back.
And look forward to making new ones.
And so in this country they got called the Rudy Baker's Hannah. They got to saying hand them over, and it got teached in with the next generation to call them Hannah.
The natural world will continue to be a source of wonder and inspiration for us.
It really surprised me. Each one has their own personality. They really do. But I guess my favorite one would have to be the first male we released. He was a big male, and he was just as friendly as he could be. But as soon as he hit the water, he was gone.
Are there cougars in these mountains?
I've been told there are.
He's just like a little pup thing. He's still not ready to really wake up.
Fortunately, the humans we've met on the Heartland Series have had their eyes open, and they've opened ours. Each week, we'll renew old acquaintances and favorite episodes from seasons past.
It will be a year of rediscovery, a year of new questions. But for all our musings about what the future may hold, we will always return to what we hold dear, the land.
For the Heartland Series, I'm Bill Landry.
Beautiful day for sleigh riding.
Beyond itself.
Mm-hmm.
Did that get it off his leg? Okay. Come on, boys. Come on. Easy. Come on. Easy.
Yeah.
You know, life is full of beauty and pain. It don't matter who you are. My name is Betty Fountain Mason. I was born a slave woman in East Tennessee almost 150 years ago. Lord knows times was rough then, but looking back, I think I led a blessed life. One reason was James Mason, whose love for me flowed as pure as spring water. He was born in Knoxville, the property of Major James Swan. Major Swan owned lots of slaves, but he always took a liking to James. And so did I. We fell for each other quick as lightning. Before you know it, we was married. And Major Swan started treating James like a man. He told James he could hire himself out after he finished his work at home. And if he made any money, James could keep it. Imagine that, a slave making money. Soon he could buy a nice suit or a mule just like a free man. But James didn't want that. No, Lord, that man had taken a vow the day we married that his wife would never bow to a slaver's whip or be taken away in the night. Every penny, every hour, every drop of sweat was to buy my freedom.
Man, what you work so hard for.
Killing yourself for a woman? Killing yourself like that for anybody must be crazy.
What makes me think I can free anybody? I'm losing my strength. I'm nothing without my strength.
Year after year, James did the work of 3 men. Then there came a day of great rejoicing. James' wildest dreams had come true. It seemed like blessings poured down from the heavens. We was both free.
He bought a house with the money he saved to buy his wife. And in that home, his spirit of giving flourished. He shared it with black children who couldn't hear or speak. Later, the state provided funds for a school here on Dandridge Avenue. He founded a church, was a member of the police force, and was the first black man in Knoxville to pay taxes.
James Mason was born a slave with no voice in the world, but with a determination that gave him strength. He had the courage to love that speaks to all ages. This is the Heartland Series.
There are varieties of apples that exist in East Tennessee and Western Carolina that don't exist anywhere else.
Henry Morton collects rare antiques, apple varieties of the southern Appalachians.
Most every mountain family had a little home orchard. There's a tremendous amount of apples exported out of the mountains. Like in 1925 and 1928, they come in the park.
But when the park came, many of the rich and flavorful mountain apples were lost. Many of these old varieties are making a comeback, thanks in no small part to Henry Morton. Henry heads to the back country to find the old varieties, because they can't be found anywhere else.
Are these old mountain varieties that folks had planted a long time ago?
Well, some of them are what we call antique varieties, and some of them are over 100 years old, and some have even been bearing fruit over 100 years.
All Henry needs is a piece of one-year-old growth from a rare old variety, and he's in business. Henry Morton's nursery in Gatlinburg is more a treasury for old mountain varieties, grafted from old trees throughout the region. He grows these trees just for the graft wood, also called sign wood. Their names are strange to us, but well known to mountain folks. Fall sheepnose, Baldwin, black twig, to name a few, and limber twigs, the largest collection in the world.
That will preserve a variety. You graft it and it preserves the variety.
You mean like one piece of sign?
One piece of sign wood, yeah. That's all you got to have.
Is there a lot of ways to graft?
Well, there's several ways. Probably the most common way, or the most popular way for grafting, is called the whip grafting.
Is that what you're going to do?
Yeah, that's what I'll do here.
The time to do it is in...
Well, begin around the mid-February. We say when the sap rises, in the spring of the year.
Henry begins with a good, healthy rootstock, raised especially for apple trees.
How many grafts can you get off that one root?
About 4.
Root graft.
Now, this don't look like it will live at all, but it's a real good way. You can have good success with it. Now, that has to match on one side for sure.
What has to match is the cambium layer just beneath the bark. It's also called the sap ring and carries the life of the young tree.
That's all there is to it?
That's all there is to root grafting.
Our graft should grow into a 4 to 5 foot whip in a single season. For faster growth, Henry grafts an entire root to his sign wood. This red royal limber twig could bear fruit in as little as 4 years.
This grafting, though, why can't you just grow this tree from seed?
Well, you plant the seed of an apple and they won't come back true to name. It has to do with the bee pollinating the apple bloom. The bee that pollinated may have been on a sheep nose, it may have been on a winter john, it may have been on a wine sap, and then when it lights on that particular bloom, and then when that apple matures, you plant the seed again, you may have some apples mixed with sheep nose, limber twig, and wine sap, and then you may even come up with a junk apple because the bee may have been on a crab apple before it pollinated, see?
We're going to get a limber twig apple here.
You will sure get a true-to-name red royal limber twig because it's grafted. This has been handed down. This is an age-old thing. That's the way you keep them true to name. You have to graft them to keep them true to name.
You'll find them tucked away in the coves and hollers and along the highways in our region. They're beautiful and practical and ingenious, and you'll only find them in East Tennessee. I'm Bill Landry for the Heartland Series. Today we bring you the cantilevered barn, an East Tennessee invention.
They look like somebody cut just a few too many corners. Why would any farmer in his right mind build what looks like half a barn? But the farmers didn't run out of timber. These are planned structures that are as distinctive as the people that built them. And like most everything else East Tennesseans build, the reasons are grounded on just plain common sense. Mary Ann Moffett and Lawrence Woodhouse have studied those reasons for the past year.
You get very good protection for the weather for your pens because there is essentially 10 feet of dry area all the way around them.
And if you could design a barn where the actual rain off the roof would drop away from the actual crib, you'd keep the cribs dry and therefore termite-proof.
The way the roofs cantilever or extend beyond the rest of the barn lets air blow through to dry the hay or tobacco faster. It also provides a shelter for animals that are smart enough to come in out of the rain. And the folks smart enough to build these barns were located right here in East Tennessee.
It seems like someone in East Tennessee did this back in the 19th century, but they are found here and nowhere else.
There used to be another one up here up the road here just a little on the place that is nearly as big as this one. Same kind.
Fred McMahon owns what may be the largest cantilevered barn in existence. It's been in his family for over 100 years.
Yeah, before they rotted down or tore down and rebuilt the other kind, they had this kind of barns all around here.
Most of the barns still standing are in rural areas like Sevier County, but chances are they were built all over East Tennessee. As long as the timbers were available, so were the means to put together a cantilevered barn.
They get their logs all in and get them hewed down the way they want them. Then they'd have what they call the barn raising. Everybody in the community would come in and they'd stack those logs up.
The people of East Tennessee cleared timbers up to 50 feet long for the cantilevered beams. And with this huge timber, they could build lofts that held a lot more hay than traditional barns. To get hay up in the lofts, farmers used a hook and pulley system that made it possible for one man to unload a wagon full.
Ingenious is the only word for it because it makes a very clever use of the materials they have, and they're graceful on top of it all. Somebody on many of them has taken the time to taper the cantilevers as they go out to the end. As your arm tapers as it goes out to the hand, if your arm stayed the same width all the way down, your arms wouldn't look as graceful.
Cantilevered barns were a combination of good sense, good resources, and good hard work. They also provided a boy the perfect place to carve in his name and forever remember days long past.
You can't ask much more of a building than that.
There wasn't much here but a school and a few churches when Dr. Robert Thomas, a minister and physician from Scranton, Pennsylvania, came here in 1926.
Surrounded by a splendor that would soon transform them into a national park, these mountains were still a refuge for typhoid and smallpox, among a people suspicious of medicines that didn't grow out of the ground, and suspicious of a man who began his medical career traveling these peaks and valleys on horseback. Just before he died, Doc Thomas recalled those early days.
They were reticent, a little bit bashful, I suppose, because I was evidently an outsider. And I stood up before the whole school, to tell children what I was there to do. And before I could even say a word, one little boy on the front seat spoke up and said, "Doc, my dad told me that if I let you shoot me against smallpox, he'd whoop me good when I got home." It was that way for a little while until they came to know me as a person and to have confidence. And then they would say, "Doc, we sure confidence you. And we know you'll tell us just like it is."
If they had no money, he was paid with fodder for his horse, a pair of hand-knit wool socks, or a warm place to sleep on dark nights when storms blew in. Now he was one of them.
I would go to see one man for whom I had originally been called, and while I was there, mountain man would stop by and say, "Doc, I heard you was up this away. While you're up this close, would you come on up in the Cow Path ranch and see old Miss Rayfield?" "Well, yes, I'll be glad to. How do I get up on the Cow Path ranch?" "Well," he says, "you go back here to the forks of the river and go up the left-hand fork until you get to the first plain path leading up to your right across that river. And she lives the last house up that ranch." And that would happen all day long. And a man would come by and say, "Doc, heard you was up this way. While you're up this close, would you come on up in the Pinnacle Mountain and see old man Pinnacle John?"
He averaged 20 miles a day on horseback in his dual role as doctor and preacher, delivering babies and baptizing them, mending bones and burying the dead. After 10 years, he developed a heart condition and was offered a job in Knoxville, making 3 times the money. But this was where he was needed.
Even if they didn't have money, often I've heard they saying, "Well, I sure hate it, Doc, that I ain't got no money to pay you with now. But if you don't get paid in this life, you'll sure get paid in heaven."
Here where the force of nature has no bounds, human emotion flows strong and true. Dr. Thomas spent the rest of his life caring for the mountain people, an outsider who saw through poverty and superstition and was himself enchanted with the beauty of a land and the sincerity of its people. This is the Heartland Series.
Perhaps we'll see some wildlife today.
We're crossing the Tennessee River on the old Washington Ferry, here about 10 miles below Watts Bar Dam. We're on our way to use an age-old method to improve habitat for waterfowl and small animals. And it's done with fire, and we're going to set it today on the Heartland Series.
We're going to burn an area of approximately 30 acres in size.
Is it dangerous?
Not really. The slough is surrounded by cultivated agricultural fields, and we don't think there's much danger of it escaping the area. We want to burn it just prior to the growing season, so that there'll be just a short period until the new growth starts back. Well, here's our crew.
This light-colored vegetation, giant cut grass, it gets so dominant in these areas that it really chokes everything else out.
Our plan is to remove it. The new growth will provide food for returning waterfowl. Our method is fire.
Yeah, it's going to blow it back in our faces here. Y'all need to back up. Camera does. There you go. Put it out back here as your line moves ahead. Catch it over there. Bill!
Yo!
Look, see if you can get to that right quick.
My rake just burned up. I don't got anything but a stick.
Where's the head of it?
Shall I beat it to death?
Beat it to death. Yeah. Get ready. You better get it started over there. We got some wind.
That wind's shifting around.
Right, that's the problem when you're burning. The wind shifts could get you in trouble.
Controlled burning such as this makes use of modern scientific data, but the captivating presence of fire connects us to ancient cultures. The Egyptians believed a bird of great beauty arose from its own ashes, and by observing naturally occurring fires, the American Indian learned to benefit from them.
Yeah, they noticed that deer and other animals came in and really utilized the succulent new green vegetation after a fire. And the deer used that and made good hunting areas, so the Indians use fire a lot to maintain certain areas for hunting.
Our purpose has changed little today.
You'll see this area greening back up within a matter of weeks. And in 3 or 4 weeks, most of the signs of fire will be gone.
Eventually, the cut grass will again take over this field. But for a time, a variety of plants will grow here, and the quail and waterfowl will once again make their presence known. This is the Heartland Series.
Well, of course, my family came from Scotland in the late 1700s, and they actually settled right back on top of Newman's Ridge.
Rick Stewart of Hancock County may be the last of a vanishing breed of tradesmen. For 6 generations, his people have been coopers. He learned from the best, his grandfather, Alex Stewart, the master craftsman.
This is the shop, huh?
Yes, this is where Grandpa taught me to do my coopering.
Cooper shop. Now, Cooper makes buckets?
Buckets, churns, tubs, anything that holds water.
This rough cedar is worked into staves that will form the sides of the bucket Rick will make today. The really hard work begins and ends with the shaving horse.
It's real tough wood. Won't hardly rot. The red will just
Rick uses the same methods that his great-great-great-grandfather used 200 years ago.
Has to be done by hand.
Well, if you want it to be made like your ancestors made it, you make it this way, or I do. I want to be able to set one of my buckets beside one of my great-great-grandfathers and it look the same. Well, now there's one. If I only had about 22 or 3 more to go with it, we could start on the bucket.
Rick planes the edge of the staves at an angle so they'll fit together in a circle. Many of Rick's tools have been used by his family for generations. This curved drawing knife is so old even his grandfather didn't know how old it was. It's what gives the staves their telltale shape. Rick makes coopering look easy, but to get a bucket to come out perfectly round takes precision and experience. A pair of longer staves must end up directly opposite each other to support the bucket's handle. Since no 2 staves are the same width, getting them to fit exactly takes years of experience.
After you do it a few hundred times, it gets, a little easier.
Now this is the moment of truth.
This tells us where we did it right or where we did it wrong. Looks like we did it right.
Rick's grandfather taught him well.
In coopering, he explained everything to the point, and easy to remember terms. You make it in your mind before you make it with your hands. You got to know what you're making or you can't make it.
When you're with other craftsmen, do they think you're too young for this?
There is a stereotype about craftspeople, or folk artists. They feel they should be old gray-haired men and gray-haired ladies, and that's only because they're the few people that's left doing it. They need to be more young people doing it, I think.
To measure the bottom, Rick moves a compass 6 times around the groove in the bucket to get its circumference.
Who told you that?
That's the way my grandpa did it, the way his dad did it, and the way his dad before him.
And as they did generations ago, adding a white oak band is an all-important final step to a Stewart bucket.
The pressure from this is all that holds your bucket together. So there's no glue or nails involved. It's all wood holding wood.
Add a handle, hours of sanding, and it's done. Once filled with water, the staves swell to make it watertight.
How is this different from your granddaddies and your great-grandfathers?
Well, other than age, on this bucket, which my grandfather made, they're a lot alike.
You can't tell his work from that of his ancestors, but there is a crucial difference. They made theirs to hold water. Rick Stewart makes his to hold history. This is the Heartland Series. Last summer, we introduced you to the symbol of the Smokies, the black bear. At that time, we looked at the hazards the bear faced in his well-visited habitat.
But the black bear also faces danger in the winter months. For the Heartland Series, I'm Bill Landry with a look at the black bear in hibernation.
University of Tennessee researcher Dr. Mike Pelton has studied the black bear for the past 16 years. It's during this time of year that the research staff checks on hibernating bears located in remote areas of the Smokies and surrounding national forests. But these bears aren't down in caves, they're up in trees.
These big trees are obviously a good place for them. High off the ground, dry, secure, well insulated. Right up there. That's where we're supposed to go.
Oh, no.
Head out. Not allowed to stumble and fall.
Are these bears dead asleep?
No, we call it carnivorous lethargy. They're just barely asleep. They're very easily aroused.
Researchers are able to monitor a bear's location through signal-emitting collars. By listening to the frequency, Dr. Pelton and his research assistants can even detect the bear's movement inside the den. Hibernation is a survival technique. It enables the bear to sleep through the months when there's no food available. The bear's body undergoes drastic changes to accomplish this feat.
The black bear has a unique kidney system. They will not eat, drink, defecate, or urinate for 3 to 4 months. Their whole system shuts down. Physiologists have discovered new diets for kidney disease patients based on what we know about black bears.
It's not only the digestive system that is affected by hibernation. The whole reproductive cycle centers around this phenomenon.
When they breed in July, the fertilized egg just floats around in the uterus of the female and doesn't implant. In fact, it won't implant until the last of November, 1st of December.
This enables the female to forage in the fall without being hindered by her pregnancy. While the embryo is present, it won't start to develop until just before the bear goes into hibernation.
When those young are born in mid-January, they're very small and immature, and they don't take much of her energy while they're in the winter den.
Last fall's acorn crop was sparse, and many females did not build up enough of a fat layer to allow them to produce cubs. And the quest for food resulted in many bears leaving the protection of the mountains, some never to return, the victim of poachers. But the greatest threat to the bear is the loss of the large trees used for hibernation.
As the years have gone by, we've been totally amazed at how dependent these bears are on big trees in the winter for survival here in the mountains. 99% of the dens have been associated with big old trees, and I think people need to appreciate that a little more.
For now, the black bear has found refuge in the great trees of the Smoky Mountains. How long it will continue to enjoy its lofty sheltered dens remains to be seen. So long as the delicate balance of nature remains tipped in its favor, the black bear will continue to be mysterious, powerful, and free, the symbol of the remaining eastern wilderness. For the Heartland Series, I'm Bill Landry.
The music of the mountains, haunting in its simplicity. It speaks to our sense of the past, much of it going back 400 years to the days of William Shakespeare. The songs harmonize with the realities of everyday life, celebrating the good and coping with the tragic, timeless messages that filtered down through the generations. Margaret Moore inherited the songs from her family and friends. Accompanied by her lap dulcimer, she remembers the songs of our English and Scots-Irish ancestors who live forever in the melodies.
A cherry, when it's blooming, it has no stone. A chicken, when it's pecking, it has no bone. The story of I love you, it has no end. Baby, when it's sleeping, has no crying.
With the music came the step dances, allowing only the bottom half of the body to move. It was a proper dance, the forerunner of the Virginia reel.
Do not dance with great abandon, because first of all,
I never did.
First of all, well, many people do. The people were a little shy and rather dignified. Be in a hurry, no time for losing. Join your right hands, this broom step over.
Uh-oh.
And kiss the lips of your true lover. Picking up the pawpaws, put them in the basket, way down yonder in the pawpaw patch. Charlie's neat and Charlie's sweet and Charlie is a dandy. Every time he goes to town, he brings his girl some candy. But that was great fun for these people, too.
Yeah, I'm having a ball here.
Oh.
Margaret Moore's love of the old song spans the centuries, but a special song she heard in Kentucky put her in touch with the recent past.
When I came home, I liked the song so much that I said to my Aunt Lottie, have you ever heard this song? Oh, children, won't you come and go along with me? For heaven is my own. Our Lord is gone, but he's coming back again to take his children home. He will raise. She said, your grandmother sang that song in church the Sunday before she died. Well, my grandmother died when she was 22 years old. And I had never seen her, of course. My father was just a year old when she died. So, but I was very attracted to the song, and I really feel very close to that song. And take them home to their God.
Say hello to another season, a yardstick that helps us measure time. A new season adds perspective to all our lives. But first we must take the time to notice its passage.
Ain't hard to wait to get out there and plant some seed or set out some things and watch it grow. It's the most beautiful time to me. Everything before the grass gets tall enough to mow, everything looks so in order.
For Edith Wampler, time means more than the passage of days or hours. It's a measurement of beauty, a mingling of the present and past.
You observe so many things when you're walking that you don't see otherwise. Like the birds, we knew where every bird's nest was from there, from home to the schoolhouse. And every pretty flower. And now people go so fast in the car, you seldom see any of that. That's where I learned my 3 R's, 1- and 2-room schoolhouses. I can just close my eyes, of course, and visualize the painted walls, the dusty floors, and the playgrounds and all the games that we played. Old folks said clocks, as they ticked, said, take your time, take your time. And now they say, as a clock ticks, it says, get together, get together. It's faster than that. Time didn't mean as much to those people back in those old days as it does now.
Right now, we're supposed to be somewhere else, every one of us. They don't have time to listen to a bird sing, and you can't hardly go anywhere that somebody won't ask you, do you have the time? One day my oldest granddaughter was in Knoxville, and she was going to catch a bus, and she met this man on the street, and she says, sir, do you have the time? He said, yes, I sure do, and he just kept walking right on the other direction.
We've just been here about a week, and there really hasn't been time to report anything yet. We are sticklers, of course, for accuracy and would not want to overplay this find in any way.
What Dr. Master has discovered in this dry lake bed in Union County may be the most significant archaeological find in recent history. Working on a Ulysses Grant, he has discovered the intact tusk of a mastodon, or woolly mammoth, an elephant-like creature that roamed East Tennessee during the last ice age.
What's this here? No, don't touch, Bill. It's 10,000 years old, and we just, if you not put your hands on it. But you are looking at what really has got us really excited about the whole find, and we have found a tusk just like this over there, and if you'd like to go over there now and take a look at it, its mate, we will show you what we believe that little indenture to be.
Two of them. The same carved indentation appears on this second tusk as well. It is also flat on the bottom, and the additional discovery of leather bindings has led Dr. Master to a startling conclusion.
We believe these early Paleo Indians used this tusk, along with the other one, in some sort of water ritual, I'm saying.
Water skiing?
Well, in layman's terms, that's what I'm saying.
Could it be that thousands of years ago, Paleo Indians pulled water skiers? How?
Well, it's quite possible, Bill, to pull a skier by human power. That is conceivable, but it's also very tiring.
Instead, Dr. Master believes that an ancient rite of manhood evolved here.
What is this? Well, this is the area we are calling for now the impact area, where...
impact area?
Right, where another method of pulling these skiers was devised.
According to Dr. Master, an elaborate system of pulleys and heavy stones were used to propel young braves in a daring test of courage.
And they would, of course, stop when they felt like their manhood had been tested. Unfortunately, a number of them, as you can tell by the absolute impact area here, where a few of them went, well, I guess head first right into this rock.
You mean that was caused by somebody's nose?
Could be a nose, could be an ear. I think we have found so far 3 upper incisors lodged in this rock.
An assistant has found what may be a pulley on top of the bluff.
Come on.
Well, wait a minute. It's the rope.
This is science in action, Bill.
Down.
Oh yes. Look at this. See, Bill? This rock, the worn surfaces here.
That's just a rock.
Caused by years of hemp being pulled at great speeds across it. Of course,
we go back down to the lake bed floor to confirm the date of his theory.
We're dating it now in the field, Bill.
That's carbon paper.
Right. We're carbon dating the tusk. You will see minus 10,000 years, just as we expected.
Come on.
At the end of the Pleistocene period and the beginning of the Happening period.
Happening.
Okay, we've got to pack up now, Bill, and we've got to go.
Wait a minute.
Let's get these tusks here, fellas, and clean up. We've got to go back to Ohio here. All right, guys, pick up stakes.
Ohio State
we'll go over this way. I think there's more evidence of
a
saber-toothed tiger used for sailplaning here. And Phoenicians landed here many moons ago. I tell you, this place is rich
April 1st.
I think we ought to do that sheepskin first, because it's the biggest.
Luke Ballew of McMinn County is a man who always made do with what he had. Since he was a hunter, that included tanning the animal's skin, the hide.
There's a lot of different ways to do this, isn't there?
Well, they was, but I never did do no way except this way because it was easy to get the stuff and it's cheap. I'll mix this mixture of saltpeter and borax and alum, rub it till it rubs in good. Don't leave a spot on the pail that's not rubbed in good with this here mixture. It dries it up, brother. You see, Bill, that dries, you get this worked up like that, and it'll just roll off. And that'll be just as sleek and white under that.
For a young Luke Ballew, hunting those red hills above Athens was tough work, though it beat hoeing a field for $1 a day. But tanning a hide, changing animal skins into leather, now if you want work...
Anything that ain't worth working for, it ain't worth much. The good works is ahead of you.
What?
The good thing's ahead of you, the pleasure you get out of sitting on it. You take your wife to the mountain, throw this out by a big spring and tell her to spread that food, darling.
They call you Lukey Boy?
Lukey Boy. They didn't call me Wild Lukey, but that's been a pretty good name for me at one time.
Were you pretty wild?
Whew. I was wild till I was 72 years old. I sowed wild oats so long I was getting to harvest cuckabirds, and so I quit.
Finally, we left the sheepskin to dry. Now Luke shows us how to make leather from a groundhog hide using oak and hickory ashes.
Why is that burn so bad?
Oh, that's got ashes in them. That's a lie. That's powerful stuff. Let me lay this down now.
After 4 days, the hair had all come off, just like Luke said it would. Now the hide is scraped and brushed and prepared for washing. It's a lot of work. And when you're done, what have you got?
Oh, shoestrings, Bill. You'll be an old timer when you put these shoestrings in there. They say, "Ooh, look at that country boy." I'd say, country boy, I may be look like a country boy, but I still like my groundhog shoestrings.
Making do with what you had. From it you got shoes, harness leather, straps, reins, banjo heads, and shoestrings. And what's the value of shoestrings, you say? Luke says their worth is not measured by whether or not they keep your shoes tied.
This hard work, Lukey.
That's all you're made for. That's what you're put here for, to work. Knowing how to do a thing is worth a lot, whether you do it or not.
This is the Heartland Series. In the early part of this century, Knoxville looked much more urban than it does now. The city was growing by 10 to 15,000 people a year. Wholesale houses and factories fueled the booming economy of a congested city. Many rural East Tennesseans had to adjust to the problems of urban life. One of the most devastating of these was fire. The Great Fire of 1897 was still on the minds of many when the Imperial Hotel went up in flames in 1916. Pat Roddy Jr. lived just 4 blocks from the Imperial, which stood on the corner of Gay and Clinch.
It happened at night. It waked everybody in the community when the East Knoxville fire trucks went by, or not trucks, they were wagons. With their bells ringing and there's smoke coming out of there. It was blowing debris all over that section, and looked like it was raining fire. They didn't have the machines that could raise up and get above the fire. The next day, while they were still throwing water on it all the next day. But by that time, everything was on the ground, walls had all.
4 years after the Imperial burned, it was replaced by the Farragut. 200 guests were in the Imperial that night. Incredibly, everyone was saved. The same wasn't the case just 2 years later, as the crowded city of Knoxville faced its most lethal threat, the great flu epidemic of 1918.
We didn't know what to do, didn't know how to fight it. I had it, but got over it, and all we had was some liquid aspirin. This one man was came into Knoxville to get supplies, and was talking about how bad it was, that he had orders that he couldn't fill because his people were sick, that they had the flu, and so this friend of his was a Christian Scientist, and told him, said, they're not sick, they think they're sick, just go back and tell them to go back to work. He did, and then sometime later, while he's back in town, and ran into this friend, and he asked him, said, how were the people who thought they were sick? He says, 12 of those people think they're dead.
Despite the flu, Knoxville continued to flourish, but soon it was facing yet another crisis, racial unrest. In 1919, a black man was accused of murdering a white woman. Pat Roddy Jr. was 17 and on his way home from a date as a lynch mob gathered outside the jail.
And they had broken into some of the hardware stores and stolen ammunition and guns and everything else. Somebody fired a gun. I don't know where it came from, but I hit the dirt. And when there was no more gunfire, I got up and I went home. I had seen enough of it, but they did finally break into the jail. But the sheriff had moved the prisoner, had moved him to Chattanooga. They got him out during the day, dressed him up as a woman, and got him out. But they got into the jail and took all the whiskey that had been stored in there from bootleggers.
Before the race riot was over, martial law would be declared and 2 men would die. Inside 10 years, the magnificent growth of downtown Knoxville would slow as the city began to creep westward. The days of the urban dweller were numbered. The race riot of 1919 proved to be a high water mark of turbulence in a boom town called Knoxville. This is the Heartland Series. They were called catamounts, mountain lions, painters, cougars, and today's landmarks are testimonials to their former domain. But these keen predators were no match for early settlers who feared for their livestock. As the panther or eastern cougar survived into our modern era, or like the elk, bison, and wolf, disappeared from all but our legends.
We have acted as a clearinghouse for cougar sightings for the last 7 or 8 years. And we collect probably in the neighborhood of 6 to 10 sightings a year. Cougars are not secretive to the point where they don't leave any trace or any track at all. And so with the large number of people that, for example, visit this national park, and the large number of people that carry cameras, it's just strange to me that we would never have concrete evidence in the form of a photo or hair or a pug mark, a footprint, or anything else that animal would leave.
But sightings of the cougar with its characteristically long tail have been reported by Park Service employees, such as Ranger J.R. Buchanan, a professional tracker.
Yeah, I've seen the tracks and also the panthers. And we have, in Cage Cove, I've seen one panther, and in Carsby, we had one panther with a cub about 6 years ago.
A solitary animal, the panther roams at night, a graceful shadow moving swiftly, easily covering 25 miles in a single evening. While the Smokies offer sanctuary, from throughout the East Tennessee countryside come tales of their presence.
The house lights there were shining in their eyes, and they were wicked-looking eyes. They looked like they were about that big around, and just glossy, shiny. But my dad, he told me about him and his dad, and he said that they had hunted them a lot of the night. And whenever that they killed one of them, why, it was a color of what most of them would call a moss color, or brown. But what they called the old-time Tennessee panther was solid black.
Now, I know a lot of people says that there's no such thing as a black panther, but they're in here. My friends have seen them, the neighbors have seen them, but they won't say anything about it because they're afraid the people will laugh at them or make fun of them. But they're here.
Despite the lack of evidence, most of us want to believe they're out there still, playing a game with us, clinging to seclusion as a means to survive. No one has been able to prove if any of these lonely hunters still exist here, whether they live in the remote reaches of our land or in our imaginations. This is the Heartland Series. Here in the Great Smoky Mountains, the passage of time is measured in eons, not years. But even to geologists, the Smokies are an old mountain range, created 350 million years ago. That was when the sandstone from North America's east coast and the landmass of Africa collided. A mountain range had been created with peaks 10 to 12,000 feet high.
Today, the Great Smokies are only half that tall, resculpted by forces that will continue to transform them.
We can actually see these processes taking place. We have to use our imaginations a little, but the clues are there.
What can we tell about the future from looking at a riverbed like this?
All right, here we see the process of erosion taking place before our very eyes. The river has been moving these rocks. And pebbles and rocks and boulders we see here now are in transit from their original resting place on the crest of the Smokies, eventually down in the Mississippi River Valley into the Delta at New Orleans. By the time they get there, of course, there'll be sand and fine silts and muds. Someday, if we come back many, many years in the future, we will see the floodplain and the meandering river and not the white water we see here now.
Long ago, Cades Cove was once as mountainous as its surrounding ridges, but this top layer of sandstone was thin here. As the Smokies wore down, the East Tennessee Valley rocks were unearthed, limestone, a soft rock that continues to give way to the forces of water and weather to form this cove.
Cades Cove will get bigger. The mountains we see before us now will gradually retreat back to the southeast as the slopes are eroded. The summit elevations will be lowered by erosion. Material will slide down or be washed down under the influence of gravity and by running water, and sediments will overspread the valley floors here. So the mountaintops will be lowered, the valley floors will be raised by sedimentation. The western wall of mountains separating the present valley of East Tennessee from Cades Cove will be removed. Eventually, some several million years at least from now, Cades Cove will be part of the valley of East Tennessee.
It's hard for us to conceive of the lifespan of a mountain range. Millennia have gone by without much notice, but changes in the last century haven't been as subtle.
Because we have clear cut, we have concrete over and asphalted over, increased the runoff, disturbed the soil, torn up the roots that hold the soil in place. We've simply accelerated the process of erosion.
In the grand scheme of geologic time, man's influence remains to be seen. To us, these mountains are solid symbols that define our land. But in universal terms, time is fluid, and nature always seeks a balance.
Lower the high places, raise the low places. Nature tends to approach equilibrium.
The pilgrimage is made every spring to farms like this on the Clinch River in Anderson County. People from all walks of life become gatherers of fruit, hoarding up supplies to last through the winter, enjoying the essence of spring all year long. In these fields are generations of strawberry pickers on a farm where a family of strawberry growers works together.
I couldn't do it without them. Well, I could hire more help, but there's nothing like having your mom and dad and folks out. And they enjoy coming out and meeting folks, and Dad's been retired for a while, and he just gets a kick out of seeing old friends, you know.
Aren't they pretty?
Yeah,
And there's a recipe down there if you'd like to have it. All right, thank you.
I got 2 or 3 things I need to say before I take you out in the field. First of all, do you see how I picked this berry? Pinched it off at the stem. That way, you don't touch the berry and it won't bruise up in the bottom of your box and turn into mush before you get to the house.
Do you come out here all the time?
Yeah, I've been coming out here about 8 or 10 years, yeah. I live in Oak Ridge now.
Back when I was a girl, we picked them for 2 cents a quart.
Where'd you grow up?
In Campbell County. Of course, back then, you could buy a lot for what you'd make in a day of picking berries. When I was younger, though, I could do better. I haven't been able to hunker down in a long time.
When was the first time you ever came out to pick strawberries?
Well, I came last week with my wife.
That was the first time?
That was the first time. She twisted my arm last week and said, come on, see how much fun it is. And I thought it was.
You didn't grow up in Tennessee, did you?
No. I was born and grew up in New York City.
How'd you get to be such an expert picking strawberries in a week?
I love to eat, particularly strawberries.
Does a berry picker always end up with strawberry stains on their knees?
I don't know. I do because I pray hard. Anybody that would go out and pick strawberries and work like they do for them are just honest folks. They're just good, honest country folks. They're not all from the country, but when they come out here, they are.
Roan Mountain in Carter County is an area full of color in its hillsides and its people.
My birthplace is up above here. I was born up there.
Molly Julian is part of these mountains. She knows their moods, their music, and their stories.
Around this curve right down here, they always claimed that you could hear something down there. And my daddy-in-law, we lived up the creek here. He was working somewhere, I forget now where it was, but anyway, it was dark and raining. And you know, we get a hard wind, south storms they call it. And when he got down there, why, it come a hard puff of wind and blew this lantern out. And he heard something up in there, it squealed or groaned or something. And he hollered, he talked coarse and fine, you know. He said, just give me old Ballew. That means you lay out.
Molly's about 80 pounds of solid determination. She was a young woman when her husband went to work in the timber business, leaving Molly to take care of the homestead.
And I was alone, and I had to tend the crops and take care of the children and do all of the work around the house.
And with each season, her list of jobs grew longer.
I canned 800 jars, and we'd buy peaches, and I'd can 3 and 4 bushel of peaches. And this here big field up here was full of strawberries, and I picked 50 pints of, made 50 pints of strawberry preserve. We just about lived off our land.
Did they make a lot of whiskey in these hills?
Why, Ernest made more than anybody else.
Who's Ernest?
My husband.
Oh.
Molly was playing the banjo the day we met her. She says she's not as good as she used to be, not since she broke her arm and hip. She learned to pick on a banjo her uncle made her, out of a groundhog hide.
Young'uns, I've lost staff. We had good music, and we just have the this time it was. Maybe stay to 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning.
And Molly has no trouble remembering the words to the mountain songs.
Come here, my little wifey, explain this thing to me. How come my head lying on the bed where my head ought to be? You blind fool, crazy fool, can't you never see? It's nothing but a cabbage head your granny gave to me. I've traveled this world over 1,000 miles or more. Mustache on a cabbage head I never did see before.
It was the herdsmen from the British Isles that brought them here, and our language still speaks of a sheep-herding past. 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, black sheep of the family, pulling the wool over your eyes.
They tell us there were more sheep in Tennessee right during the Civil War, right after the Civil War, than at any other time. And if I remember right, I think 250,000 head of sheep in the state at that time, whereas today there are only 10,000.
One reason for a decline in sheep herding was the invention of synthetic fibers, and also some man-made rumors.
This whole thing of the sheep men and the cowboys not getting along, I think is more in the movies than any other place. There's certainly no problem in this part of the country. You go on down and kind of get in front of them so they don't go all the way down.
During the last 3 years, the greatest increase nationally in numbers of sheep has been in Tennessee. And when the weather gets warm, sheep farming families like the Powells practice an essential art.
they really appreciate you getting the wool off of them in the hot summertime. And if it's their first time to be sheared, they'll put up a struggle, but some of them have been sheared 3 and 4 and 5 times. So it's just common ordinary thing for them.
I don't have a favorite. I don't have a favorite. I just love them all.
J.H. Pop Rice's love affair has been going on now for nearly all of his 82 years. Pop and his son Lester restore antique cars. Out of their little shop in Harriman, Tennessee have come some legendary restoration jobs, like the 1910 Thomas Flyer that had been converted into a fire truck and now back to a car. Once Pop rebuilt the only car ever manufactured in Chattanooga, a 1912 Nyberg. All the customer had was a chassis.
He found the chassis somewhere and they couldn't find the body, so we built it.
What'd you use as your model?
Picture.
A picture?
Yeah, that's right. Just a picture.
It is not a craft practiced in a sterile environment. One moment, a cacophony of hammered metal and brute force. Then a smoothly silent stroke of a striping brush. Practiced control in all of its forms.
Do you have a lot of tools here? A lot of fancy mechanical?
No. The only thing they gave me was what the Lord gave me. That's right.
How do you know when it's right?
You can feel it.
I can't feel it.
Well, you just have to learn how to feel it. That's the whole thing. See, you just, it's something that you learn when you're doing it. Now you feel with the bottom part of your hand, not your fingers. See? You're going to have good, dirty hands there. See there?
Today, lasers and robots mimic the work of the human eye and touch with a cold precision. But accuracy to 1,000th of an inch doesn't measure the true nature of a craft. It's a definition still based in human terms.
And the thing that I like, you get something like that T-model up there, and when you get all done, have the owner come down here and he's got a grin on his face from one side to the other to see what he's got. See? He's just taking a look at that. And that does me more good than anything else. A satisfied customer. I don't even work on my own modern off car. I just don't have the urge to, don't have the feeling for it. You got to love the car that you're doing. You love your work, in other words.
It's Lester's shop now, and Pop's content to share his knowledge with 4 generations of Rices. He's taught restoration at McPherson College in Kansas and was honored as professor with a master teacher degree.
All the awards you've gotten for championship cars, does that mean as much as that degree?
Oh, no. It took me 80 years to get that degree. 80 years.
Some would say it's a gift, to take a rusty bucket of metal and transform it. Pop Rice would disagree.
It's not a gift. It's not a gift that you just run into. It's a gift that you got to make. But the Lord did give me a good pair of hands and a little brain, not much, but He gave me a little brain, and that's it. I used them and to my best ability, and I'm glad I did.
Their size is a throwback to a saltwater past. Called rockfish, striped bass, or stripers, they're an adaptable fish. They became landlocked during the construction of the South Carolina Dam when they swam upstream to spawn, but they quickly adjusted to a life in fresh water, and now the deep waters of East Tennessee are their home.
Tennessee first got interested in striped bass in the 50s because these man-made lakes changed our habitat here entirely. What happened was we had tremendous acreages of water that had a lot of forage fish in them, but not really many sport fish or even good commercial species.
To fill that niche, biologists decided on the striped bass. But there was one problem. Their eggs revert to an earlier time. A code evolved over millions of years still requires moving water for them to develop.
When the larva first hatches, it's not strong enough to be a free swimmer. It would settle out to the bottom if it didn't have adequate current. You're talking about a minimum probably of 50 miles of good flowing river for successful reproduction.
But Dave Bishop and his crew at the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency came up with a solution that allowed the striped bass to spawn naturally.
The tank spawning system was developed in Tennessee at Morristown Hatchery. And about the only way we could do it without having miles of raceway was to just have it go round and round.
In the circular tanks, the female releases about 2.5 million eggs that the male fertilizes. After the fry have hatched and are able to swim, they're transferred into ponds. There they'll feed and grow into fingerlings.
Generally they stay from 60 to 90 days, and they'll be from 2.5 to 3 inches long when they're taken out of the pond.
After they grow to a minimum size of 15 inches, they're anyone's game, including the TWRA crews. By using shock waves, they bring the fish in for spawning unhurt.
What a fish!
You taking eggs out?
Yeah, taking the eggs out for the seeing what we are to be eventually right. See if she's an eligible fish.
So you'll take her back with you?
Yeah. Yeah, she's a good fish.
The very first striped bass we had show up weighed 1 pound and 2 ounces. And I drove down there and I must have shot 3 rolls of film on that one fish. Now I don't even bother to remember who catches a 55-pounder.
I heard this noise that sounded like a machine in the distance, or maybe a burglar alarm.
Like many of us this spring, Mrs. Kenneth McMahon had just had a close encounter with an alien creature.
I thought they might be a locust and they might eat the vegetation.
She called UT entomologist Harry Williams, who assured her that the strange bugs aren't locusts. Instead, they are North America's longest living insects, the 17-year cicada. There are 23 cicada broods in the United States. This year's is brood 10, the largest. Mrs. McMahon remembers the 1970 brood.
They are about 75 to 80% more in number this time than they were then.
How many of these things are around?
They are occurring in the millions. Tremendous populations.
Unlike locusts, cicadas don't damage plants by feeding, but females can do some harm by drilling into the bark of small twigs to lay eggs, causing some twigs to die. Except for this minor damage, cicadas are quite harmless. The Indians and the Pilgrims thought they were evil hordes. Today, people just find them a nuisance.
They don't scare me. I just don't like they're so ugly. And they make all these holes in the ground, and that makes my skin crawl.
Coincidentally, crawling is precisely how cicadas spend most of their 17 years, burrowing and feeding on tree roots underground. Then in their 17th spring, they emerge. Appearing just after sunset, they seek out the nearest vertical surface, and then the magical transformation to adulthood begins. Come morning, their night's emergence is evident by the thousands. By mid-morning, the woods sing with a mating call of male cicadas. Tympanic membranes on the sides of the male produce his unique sound. It is quite effective, and the chase is on. After waiting 17 years, cicadas mate with an unshakable determination. Mating cicada tie clips are not unheard of. Adult cicadas live just 3 to 6 weeks, emerging only to mate, lay eggs, and die. Their lifespan, emergence, and very existence are perplexing.
They don't seem to have any purpose. That's what I don't understand. I mean, what's the purpose behind it?
You know if there's any good use for them?
I can't think of a good use except they say catfish like them. So I think I'm going to have to gather some up and go catfishing. I definitely feel that I'm not alone when I'm in my yard.
Though we may not understand their place in the natural scheme of things, after they leave, we'll have 17 years to ponder the mystery of the cicada. However we feel about them, when they return in 2004, they'll be even louder.
At the foot of this ridge in Hancock County lies a cemetery, one that may unlock the myths and legends of a mysterious race of dark-skinned people. They are called Melungeons, and this is their story. I'm Bill Landry, and this is the Heartland Series.
John Sevier first discovered them in 1784, a supposedly dark-skinned, dark-haired, blue-eyed people whose past was as hazy as the mountains they inhabited. One theory states they're a lost tribe of Israel, another that they're Phoenicians who settled here after sailing the great Atlantic, and another that they're descendants of Sir Walter Raleigh's lost colony of Roanoke. These are some of the legends, but the truth is as mysterious as their name.
The word Melungeon is an interesting word. Do you know where it comes from?
No, when I look it up in the dictionary, just word Malang, which means mixed breed. So I kind of like the meaning of the word because any of us could be a Melungeon.
This is Newman's Ridge in Hancock County, a refuge for a clan named Collins, Gibson, Mullins, and Goins. They were dark-skinned people who spoke the white man's language and worshiped the Christian God. This not only caused suspicion by their fellow East Tennesseans, it created fear. But physical differences paled in comparison to the mental image portrayed in 1891 by a Nashville writer who had stayed with the Melungeon family. William Allen Dromgoole wrote that the Melungeons were shiftless, filthy, inhospitable, untruthful, and immoral. Insults that would take the Melungeons more than 100 years to overcome.
Somebody wanted to sell magazines or books. That's simple.
Why do the Melungeons here not like to discuss it?
Well, because most people want to make fun of them.
We lived on Newman's Ridge, and living on the ridge, I think all the people were poor, very poor. We really don't know if we have different characteristics or not, but maybe some of our skins may be a little bit darker, or whatever.
But as far as their customs and beliefs went, the Melungeons were no different than any other East Tennessee mountaineer.
The school and church in the valley was the most important thing for the Melungeon people. It gave them something to do, somewhere to go.
Confronted with ridicule and forced into isolation, the Melungeons denied their heritage to the world and to themselves. Rumor fed upon rumor, and the Melungeons became an attraction, a curiosity. The origin of these East Tennessee mountaineers is lost to history, but their descendants will never be ashamed again.
I take pride in being a Melungeon because I think that the Melungeon people has been proven that they are honest, hard-working people. And yes, I would say that the Melungeon people are proud mountain people, just like anyone else.
Very independent. Most of them are fishermen and hunters, and well, they just like to be in the mountains. I think that's probably 50% why he's a logger, because it's things he likes to do. He wants to be outdoors, he wants to be close to nature, and I think that's why he does it. A lot of work, a lot of hard work. A lot of chainsaw work, a lot of cable pulling, and, well, it's just good hard work. There's nobody to talk to. That's why you get a lot done. If you got nobody to talk to, you work harder. A man's life is in his own hands, or anyone around him. Their lives is in his hands. You have to trust each other. If I could trust a man, I wouldn't go down the woods. I'm almost positive nobody understands a logger. You would have to work with one or be one to know.
It's called the stone that built Cumberland County. And one look around Crossville and you can see why.
It's what makes up the plateau, and if you look a few feet underground, you'll find it.
Its strength and beauty were secrets of the plateau until the 1930s. During those years of the Great Depression, folks were able to survive with the help of a stone they dug out of the earth. It's so solid it even repels water, and it was used for bridges, steps, walls, even roofs, anything built to last. Clarence Davis is one of many stonemasons still working on the plateau.
That's the good stone you want there?
Yes, this is a good stone here. This is all the rotten top up here that we have to drill and shoot and take all this off till we get down to a good stone here, and that's what we take up and save for good stone.
Comes up in all different
thicknesses, from ½ inch up to 5 or 6 inches thick. When I first started, it was a way of life. You worked in stone to make a living, to eat. And now I work in it because I like to do it.
This rock is harder than marble and often bends the steel wedges used to extract it. But with nothing more than a wedge, a hammer, and just the right touch, Clarence and his son Cecil can break it easily into sheets of solid rock.
He has to do all the work. Yeah, he's done this 50 years. He ought to know what he's doing. He's going to say something pretty.
There he comes.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a beautiful piece.
How much does this weigh? That's about 150. That one goes over here.
Now we got him. Wait a minute. You all right?
No, we didn't have to split that one. I got this little one.
What makes that color in there?
Iron? Yeah, just different mineral deposits. You get different colors.
Today on the plateau, labor is a lot harder to come by than the days of the Great Depression. And the cost of quarrying and moving the stone makes it too expensive now for many people. But stonework keeps Clarence and Cecil busy. Together they have built almost 2,000 stone structures, including the stone laid around the governor's mansion pool in Nashville. They take pride in the fact that they have left their mark in stone. For what they've built will stand the test of time.
I like to do the art of doing good stonework, because if you do good stonework, it's there forever. You can come back anytime and look at your work, and it's always a good piece of stonework that's there.
How long will it last?
That I don't know. I don't believe we live long enough to know how long it'll last.
Hetty Woods' garden is as full of little wonders as the lady herself. She's a former surgical nurse, watercolor artist, rumored winemaker, whose affection for wildflowers began in the woods and fields around Friendsville.
That's where I first saw my first Indian pinks. I fell in love with them. And nature has something going constantly. We're just not aware of it. In the early spring, we get the profusion of flowers at that time. And then we pay very little attention after that because the weeds start growing and they hide some of the prettier things.
On first bursting forth, it's pink and then it turns white.
See how pink the buds are there at first? And then this one here is pure white. It's like my butterfly weed. See, it's all butterfly weed, but it just gets a different, it's all the same color actually, but it's just different hues.
That's a dead resurrection fern, isn't it?
It certainly does look dead, but that's the way it looks until it gets water on it. And it'll be as green and as pretty as anything you ever hope to see. This is the black cohosh, and the Indians called it the candle of the woods because it blooms and stays so long. It stays bloomed for quite a while, and it's so tall.
Hetty collects her wildflowers only from road cuts, building sites, areas that are going to be destroyed.
I try to go where they're going to be endangered.
Deeper?
Yeah, not too deep, but deep enough. We want enough of dirt with it so we can carry it to its new home without shocking it too much. I'll hold it back so you can see. Oh, that's excellent. Let me get you a paper now. That's excellent. You can dig for me. That is good. That has a real good root. This will never know it's been transplanted. I'll carry the pink, and you take that. And it's not too deep, no.
Early summer, the growing season. The wildflowers are putting forth their roots, making new plants and preparing their midsummer blooms.
It's a strange looking thing.
This is the Indian pipe. See, it has a curve of just exactly like a Dutchman's pipe, more or less. Isn't it adorable?
Looks like it's got scales, no color.
It has, those are petals. See, they're scaly petals, but it has a beautiful little flower inside. Inside it has little stamens and little pollen is down inside. You can see it. They're truly beautiful. They have petals just like any other flower, but you have to look so carefully.
It's the second season, and nature's beauties are everywhere. What better way to spend a summer's day than among them? In East Tennessee, wildflowers are what geysers and canyons are to other areas. Each is a little wonder, though often ignored. But each one holds a universe of beauty, an offering of joy for anyone to see. I'm Bill Landry for the Heartland Series. Clell McMahon knows about time. For 30 years, it was his job to wind the clock in the old Knox County Courthouse. Once a week, he would journey up through years of darkness and dust into the heart of a century-old timepiece, maintaining a chain reaction of gears and cables that sound the cadence of the hour. But with time, newer structures were built and the old courthouse closed. There was talk of tearing it down. The old clock was silenced and Clell McMahon retired. Now the courthouse is being renovated and the clock has inherited self-appointed guardians.
The cornerstone was laid in 1885 and the building was completed in 1886 and the movement for the clock was installed in 1886. So it had its centennial year last year.
Are there any rats in here?
A few pigeons. Be careful when you're walking across here. If we fall, we go down to the next story. This is the main clock tower.
Neil, the weights, there are two of them with this movement. And this particular one weighs 1,200 pounds, and it drives the strike mechanism, that is the very large hammer that clangs the bell. And in a period of week, this 1,200 pounds drops 3 stories in this building.
Is there a pendulum?
Oh yes, the pendulum is right above us.
Bill, this is what makes the clock work. This is the movement. This is one of the finest pieces of clock machinery that you'll ever see. It was made by Seth Thomas in 1886. I would doubt that there are probably more than 10 or 15 in existence today of this style. Yeah, it's capable of keeping time within 3 or 4 seconds a month. This is a small dial which tells the same time that the big dials outside tell. There's a mechanism for changing the time to regulate the clock so you can watch it here and not have to go outside to be sure that you've got the right time. This is the last one, Bill. This brings us up to the... We just struck. Our desire is to keep it running and keep it running in its original condition.
I look out and instead of seeing these big modern buildings, I just visualize the very small buildings that were here, and this was the tallest of the buildings.
Next year, the old clock will ring out each hour once again, the chimes echoing with the same clarity heard by our grandparents, in celebration of its own endurance and a reminder of the passage of time.
You're going to start off in there? Yeah. I'll start off over here. Give many hits to me? That's good. Oh, shh. Darn. See that one jumping? He took the hook. He broke my line. That was a pretty decent sized fish. I don't know about you guys, my feet are frozen. A lot of them active by the shore there. Those are tough to catch though. It's because it's so shallow. I'm tired. Also, I'm late to work.
We'd like to think all our streams look like this, but not many do anymore. This is one of the few pure streams left in East Tennessee, Cicada Creek in Monroe County, a sanctuary of nature and the only known place in the world where this small catfish lives, the smoky mad tom. It's an ominous sounding name for such a harmless looking fish. The name Mad Tom comes from the poisonous barbs that can pierce the skin. At one time, they lived in Abrams Creek in the Great Smokies. But before anyone knew the Smoky Mad Tom existed, they had already been eliminated from the mountain streams.
It was collected in the late 50s when they poisoned out Abrams Creek for rough fish renovation. And then it sat on a shelf at the University of Michigan for several years until Ralph Taylor, who was doing his doctoral dissertation on Mad Tom taxonomy, discovered it and recognized it to be a new species.
Now the federal government has declared it endangered, and Dr. Etneyer's students crawl along the bottoms of streams spring and summer, overturning every likely rock that may yield the nest of the Smoky Mad Tom and its threatened cousin, the yellow-finned Mad Tom. These aren't impressive-looking fish by most standards, but they symbolize the pure, flowing streams that were once common in the Tennessee Valley.
I've got one.
I can handle him, huh? You can handle him, yeah. Just don't squeeze him.
That's a male?
I'm a sexist, I'm afraid. That term just came out. It could be a male or a female.
Carefully lift it back on.
Yeah. Just lift it.
Like. Okay. A little baby, so it's going to be real hard to see.
Yeah, I'm gonna look.
Okay. See any? Okay, there's one over here.
That's an endangered...
That is an endangered species, and we have it in a plastic bag.
Got eggs here.
These eggs and fry will be taken back to spend a few months in the laboratory at the University of Tennessee. There they will gain an advantage of size before being returned to a world of predators. There are plans this fall to once again return the Smoky Mad Tom to its original home in Abrams Creek. A second chance for this tiny catfish, and for us, who may not be aware of the hidden value in a stream of clear water.
There are a host of fish species that live in the Tennessee River drainage and nowhere else in the world. We really don't know anything about these animals. Some of them, of the host of animals and plants out there that are poorly known to science and threatened with extinction, I guarantee you that at least some of them are going to have some important positive benefit to mankind. I don't know which ones. I don't know if it will be the Smoky Mad Tom or the snail darter. That's a practical reason, and the aesthetic reasons are more appealing to me. These are wonderful animals. Extinction is forever.
The autumn of 1985. Surely you children who see this now must remember it, so that when you are old you can tell your children how beautiful it was, and they will see it through your eyes. That's how we came about this story I'm about to tell you, told to us by an old man who was there. It was the prettiest fall many people in Compton could remember. Blood was never as red as some of the leaves. Then the weather changed, and that sound started, the sound that came from Gorman's Holler. Mostly everyone laughed about it, said it was a wampus or something. Of course, nobody believed that, and nobody knew what it was either. The person who knew it best was Wendell Miller. Wendell was the youngest son of Cora and Fred Miller, who lived at the head of the Holler. They kept pigs, and pigs being pigs, they kept them away from the house, back up in the Holler. It was Wendell's job to slop the hogs right after supper. It was a task he carried out on a dead run through most of October. Word got out about Wendell's hog slopping runs, and he took a lot of ribbon because of it. The hardest ribbon came from Obert Glover.
What you running for? You running from the boogeyman?
Raw-boned and loud, he could terrorize a schoolyard. He decided to take this ribbon one step further. In the meantime, Wendell decided enough was enough. He was going to walk to the pig pen from now on.
There ain't no such thing. You ain't gonna get me.
When the evening shadows were long, Wendell took a deep breath and set out with his bucket. He could hardly stand the sound of his own feet on the path, so he started whistling. What's that sound? Just the pigs. On he went. The sun was falling like a rock, he thought. He needed just a little more light, just a little longer. He got to the pen, dumped the slop, and looked down that dreaded path. He put one foot in front of the other and moved on. The darker it got, the quieter it got, but he kept walking. Just a little further, and he'd be in sight of the house. Just 30 more feet, then 20, and then 10. There was a light. Wendell couldn't help but smile. Wendell wasn't sure what happened next, and he couldn't say for sure what he saw, but he wasn't ashamed to tell the story. But what nobody understood was that from that day on, Obert Glover never said a word to Wendell at all.
Right up there is where it all happened. Gorman's Holler. Everything's gone now, but the old man who told us the story swears it's the truth. Such a pretty place. Doesn't hardly seem possible. For the Heartland Series, I'm Bill Landry.